Hey guys, this is Wonder here for TeamLiquid, and this is FACEIT Day 2, and I'm here with Sadokist. How you doing?
Good, actually. And you?
Pretty good, pretty good. So let's just talk about, I guess, your history as a caster before you sort of PGL and stuff like that. What were you doing?
Yeah, so I kind of had a slow start in casting. It sounds weird to say that I've kind of been casting for 8 years, but that's not really true. It sort of was something I did while I was still playing competitively. Started in COD, went to Tribes. It wasn't really until sort of the, I guess, second quarter of 2013 that I started to get a little more serious with it. It's when ESEA picked me up. I did 2 ESEA LANs and, of course, then MLG before all of this. So it's actually been I'm kind of shocked at how fast I've kind of gone from base level to where I am now. But I mean, the community to thank for that, and a lot of my peers. A lot of people don't know, maybe for better, but FACEIT's been a big supporter of me as well, and a big reason why I've had a lot of opportunity that I have had.
So let's talk about PGL, I guess, and how, it's kind of a league that just kind of sprouted out of nowhere, a really famous Dota caster, Toby Wan, and then an up-and-coming caster, you, and then, really good teams, and all culminating into this big sort of not invitational, but a small 4-team event in Bucharest. Can you just talk about how that kind of, materialized?
Yeah, I was a little bit skeptical at first when I heard a new league, but I was also really excited to go to Europe, so I wasn't about to say no. And FACEIT also, again, was the one that sort of mentioned me. Yeah, there's a few other people as well. A couple people at Twitch were quite supportive. But what really encouraged me was when I heard who their staff were, and when I was told their history, it sounded like they had tons of experience. Obviously, they've done a lot of Dota before, League of Legends. They're quite involved. Things like Minecraft, I know it's minor, but they've got lots of experience running events. And I mean, their production team nailed it. The online production was easily the best online production I've seen. I was actually shocked when I was sitting in the studio casting, watching the camera angles. It was just, I guess it was just unfortunate a little bit. There was some ebot issues at LAN where it kept trying to grab specifically me out of spectator and throw me onto a team, and then it would add stats. I mean, those are things that are uncontrollable. They're going to happen. But overall, I think they did a phenomenal job with the event.
Yeah, I think, with esports the way it is now, it's so hard for new leagues to come, into the scene with a level of production value that's like present now, and for an online league to be this, innovative with the camera angles and all that stuff, I think it's really cool to see. So, I mean, what's the future for PGL, and I guess for you as a caster?
Well, for me as a caster, it's kind of like the stressful thing. I fly back to Canada in 2 days from now, so on the 4th. I am involved with the Counterpit League, which is another new startup league with the Room on Fire guys. That's an online league. Decent teams as well. A lot of tier 1. I would say a few tier 1, a lot of tier 2 teams. Future for PGL, I think they're in a good shape. They made a good impression. Again, they've got some very reputable and high-level people behind them that do have some persuasion in the scene. But with the new startup league, obviously ESL, there's lots of rumors on. I haven't looked too much into it. I only know as much as probably anyone else online. I haven't really stuck my nose there. It's not my business. In my opinion, whatever happens, happens. But with ESL trying to lock things down, it is going to be a little bit harder for newer leagues. I know also some of the teams were quite exhausted. Hi, Alu. I know some of the teams were also a little bit exhausted at times from playing constant online events and then going to a LAN and then coming. I mean, Virtus Pro, if they'd qualified last weekend in Bucharest, it would have been 8 weekends of LANs in a row. I mean, that's a lot. So eventually there has to be sort of a stop button to say, okay, it's established. These are the events that are top tier. This is what the pro teams will do. That doesn't mean other teams can't. I mean, if CSGO Lounge still wants to support some of the lower leagues, they'll still get views. So there's still a chance. But yeah, at some point it has to stabilize, just simply for the team's sake.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about this sort of, I mean, it's both an oversaturation of tournaments, but then it's also at the same time, you don't really necessarily want one single league to, permeate through the whole week. So, I mean, I think ESL released their kind of schedule for the league, and it's about 8 weeks long, and I think, 3 or 4 days of the week are being taken up. So how do you think other leagues or even teams, how do they prioritize, like, okay, let's focus on this specific online league, and, how do they manage that?
I kind of thought the league, it's interesting to see this league run that format again, because I kind of thought the league format was dying out, and we were going more into these group stages, similar to how PGL did it. They still ran a league, but they did it over sections, and they were able to schedule around people. I'm hoping there's forgiveness there, and there is, scheduling issues that can be dealt with cooperatively from the leagues. Now, ESL's also set in stone that they want those nights, so other leagues need to be aware of that. The problem is that it is midweek. So yeah, it is a tricky situation for sure. The good news is, I suppose, in scheduling regard, that it's supposed to be best of ones. I would like to see it be at least best of twos, but then you get more time taken up, and it's more time for the teams. So, I mean, there's definitely a fine line there. I don't want to see it ever go the way of like an LCS, where we see like one LAN every 2.5 months. We don't really get to establish a pecking order. There's sort of waves of hype. Right now, it's pretty consistent. I mean, like we say, we had 8 LANs over the last 8 weeks. It's the scheduling thing will be the hardest aspect of it for sure, bar none. And I mean, hopefully, I know that the certain leagues in the past have been quite stern about that, and rightfully so. They have, in some cases, they had their matches booked like 5 days before the one that conflicted with it. But at the same time, I hope there also is understanding that there is other stuff, other obligations as well.
So moving on to some, offline events. Like you said, we've had so many events week after week, weekend after weekend, but they've kind of just been, kind of medium size to small size. I mean, the teams attending them, of course, are really, really, tier 1 teams, but they've been, 4 teams, 8 teams. What do you think of this sort of smaller size kind of event?
I think there's more intensity at a smaller size event. Kind of like we saw here with the mix. North America's clearly behind right now. It kind of makes day one. MLG was like the exception, where everyone went 1-1 on day one. That was like crazy, but that's an exception. Normally when you get 8 teams, the first day is just like establishing the order, which most people can predict. I think PGL was really cool. I think 6 teams is the ideal. I think Star Ladder was really cool with 6 teams. The unfortunate part with Star Ladder was that Na'Vi finished last despite winning a series because of GSL. But PGL was really cool, where it was super intense. The 4 teams that were there are, I would say right now, the 4 best teams in the world. I mean, look at TSM, how they performed in that company. Now, the other aspect that no one's really bringing up, and this is reading into it, but TSM normally choke late in events. Well, that late in that event was only, 4 series or 3 series for them, right? So there wasn't as many games to play. I think 6 is probably the ideal, truthfully. But again, when you're getting into these intercontinental and leagues like ESL, ESEA League, then you're going to have to bring more people. There has to be more representation from.
Do you think that, with 4 to 6 to 8 teams attending, do you think that kind of just cuts down, I guess, the number of games that, I don't know, people may not necessarily want to see? There's more like excitement for every single game.
Yeah, potentially, because an upset means more. You're already deeper into it. I mean, let's not discount the majors. I think the majors have a great system with 16 teams because they run a group stage. They run it over a longer period of time. Yeah. But a lot of times in the groups, you kind of pick and choose what you want to watch, like you're saying. Exactly. If there's so many games going on, you go, okay, well, I know what's going to happen here. I'm not going to sit in front of my computer for 4 or 5 days on end and watch everything. I'll start watching when it matters, which is typically when you get to groups, which is when you get into the bracket and out of the groups, when you get into the 8 teams, which is. So yeah, I mean, if you start with 8 teams, then you're in a really good position. The majors are very cool though. Where I said I like 6 teams, definitely for intensity, I like that sort of 6 to 8. But 16 does allow a lot of teams the chance. Obviously, we saw Keat Stars this year come over to Katowice. They made it through. It was in the Pro League. Now, but again, that's all in the back of their performances. If they had come to just MLG, they hadn't been crowdfunded. They would have gone back to Brazil. Who knows? First off, they might still be with Kaboom, who weren't able to support them. Second off, they might not have said, okay, we're actually reasonable. They might not take the chance to go to North America right now. So the fact that they could get to that major and perform the way they did, because it was 16 teams and they qualified, that's a whole like an opening experience for them. Vox Eminor, same thing. They were able to qualify into 16s. If it's only 8 teams at a major, those teams might not show up and ever really, state their case. So I think majors 16 is perfect. That has to be that. It's a major event. You need major teams. But for most tournaments that are league based and have a build up, I'd say 8 is the max you want to go with.
Let's talk about offline events in sort of the non-major capacity. I think ESL announced ESL 1 Cologne, and that's sort of a a major that's not Valve sponsored. What do you think of these events? Should there be, more huge events that aren't necessarily majors but are still large, 8 to 16 team kind of events?
I mean, the 16-team thing, I think when it's not a major, it doesn't have the hype and promotion. It might not be worth it for the lower teams, specifically if they're going to travel that far and it doesn't have the same viewership numbers, if there's no stickers involved to really support the teams. So I think for the smaller events, I think that's where the 8 cap needs to be. Again, even 6 is his sweet spot there. The majors are unique in the fact that they get a lot more support. If there was more crowdfunding available or a way to crowdfund, I mean, Valve's never going to support everyone, but if there was a way to crowd support various leagues, then you could say there's a chance for this team to go because there might be money in, return on investment. It is still a business. We have to remember that. These teams have to pay bills. So right now, I think the majors are the only ones that can really get the 16-team limit and get away with it.
Let's touch a little bit about on game balance. So, during the, I guess, PGL's run, that's when sort of the Tech9 and the SMG stuff really started kicking in. And now, I mean, the patch hasn't been, being taken back, obviously, but we've kind of settled on a weird meta right now. How do you feel about the game in general?
Truthfully, where I've been so busy in Europe and I don't have my computer here, I've kind of been sitting down at studio computers and playing when I can. I haven't played the new patch a lot, but I've definitely seen a lot of it. The mechanics, I can't say feel because, again, I haven't got much of a feel, but they even just look weird to me. I'm not convinced on it. Obviously, a lot of people on Reddit saw I thought this was made by Valve, not Activision comments. But that's the way it looked. Me coming from COD, that's literally a move we used to do. We used to sprint 2 steps.
There's no dolphin dive, though. There's no.
Well, I never used to dolphin, but you sprint 2 steps, strafe out, and shoot in the air and land crouched at the very least. I mean, it was a cool mechanic, but it was part of COD, not Counter-Strike. For me, this doesn't stick traditional. There's a debate. I think there is more balance with the SMGs against the Tech9 to answer the question about balance. I think that definitely exists now, but is it good for the game? That's the question. And I'm still not sure they found the happy medium on where it should be to because right now, balance is one thing, but skill rewarding is another. And I think the skill gap's been closed up considerably with the new patch. So hopefully they'll find a way to level it all out, bring it back the way it should be. I mean, it's definitely interesting since the patch. Maybe this has nothing to do with it. Maybe it's just the teams that were in events. But since the patch, we've had Na'Vi, VP, and TSM win. Those are 3 teams that don't win events as often as the others, which no one's really talking about. At the same time, they are various events where, certain teams weren't in attendance. But I mean, that's a point that's interesting to note.
Yeah. I mean, do you think at this point, there needs to be, Valve has openly talked about their, want to communicate more, but then we haven't actually seen anything come of it, Is there a need for players, pro players or casters or, people in the scene to have some sort of direct line or forum to the developers to, give feedback more directly?
I was kind of thinking a players' union would be the best bet. I think the players should be the ones in control of that. Sure, the owners can sit and meet with ESL and Twitch and all those guys, but the owners have different agendas. Let's not forget, they're the ones running the business. They definitely, not to say they're corporate monsters, they definitely care about the game as well, but they have a very different perspective and different relationship with it. I think a players' union, I was actually telling people that I thought one would be formed in the next 6 months. It might be behind the 8 ball now if ESEA and ESL have already made their plans. Yeah. Maybe it's not something that will come in. I mean, the other thing is you got to think of who's going to represent that. Exactly. It has to be funded because that person's then got to travel to all these teams and all these representatives, which means the teams have to contribute to a fund to, whoever's part of the union has to contribute to it. I think a players' union is the way to go in that regard, that players can have direct communication. But I do know the Valve developers do reach out to certain people. I know that Adren from Liquid has had lots of input on various maps, various map balance issues. I know that Fnatic have been asked about various maps after majors. Hey, how did that play? Why did that not work? So there is some communication, but I think overall as a whole, a players' union would be the best. I think the best idea to really make sure the spirit of the game is upheld. In some cases, these players have been a part of the game longer than some of the current developers. I mean, Neo has been playing competitively since 2002. Sure, yes, there are developers that have been around the whole time. There's also some that probably come in the last 6 months, right? I mean, it's Valve has a lot of staff going in and out, so.
All right. So I guess you're focusing on the Counterpit League. You're going back to Canada. What's what's the next offline event for you?
Actually, none are scheduled right now. It's been interesting while I've been here because while I'm in Europe, people are taking advantage of it. It's a hard plane ticket to go across the Atlantic. Don't know. There's going to be a few for sure that are coming up and that will be talked about. We'll see what happens with the ESEA when I go back. I'm going to hopefully have a meeting with them and just see what if we can't come up with something. Maybe not even for an offline deal, but just to be part of the league again. That they were who I casted with for they gave me my start ultimately. Yeah, offline for me has been a lot of last minute bookings. Even PGL was fairly last minute, so I'm not worried that there aren't any booked right now. I'm sure that'll happen soon, but right now I need to just focus on Counterpit. Hopefully get into some ESEA stuff and then odd jobs here and there just to keep me busy, and it'll go from there. That's the way it's gone so far.
All right, cool. Any last words or shoutouts?
I'm so bad at shoutouts because there's so many people I could shout out, but
one name.
Well, I guess for Flaren, just for being the guy that really helped me get here, and Trance at Twitch has been a big supporter as well. So thanks to him.